Hello there, you're following World News Live from Algiers. I'm your host, Yassine Rikti, and here's what's making the headlines. As wildfires spread across the Mediterranean, Algeria is stepping up efforts to contain fires nationwide. Civil Protection says 142 out of 195 fires recorded in the past 24 hours have been brought under control, with the ministerial delegation monitoring operations in Annaba. Tensions escalate between Washington and Tehran as Trump warns of a military response to any Iranian threat to shipping in the Strait of Hormuz. Iran says it is ready to retaliate against any U.S. strike on its facilities, claiming attacks on American military sites in Kuwait, Bahrain and Jordan. In Gaza, 12 people have been killed in the past 24 hours as calls grow to halt the occupation's expansion beyond the yellow line. Hamas says the priority now is ending the war and securing a full withdrawal. In Western Sahara, the Polisario Front is urging the UN Security Council to take urgent action over Sahrawi prisoner Nahama Asfari, calling for human rights protections. Calls are also growing to boycott the film The Odyssey of alleged normalization with Morocco. Welcome to the details of our program. First in our news, the Algerian Civil Protection Authority announced that it had extinguished 142 fires affecting forests, woodlands, scrubland, agricultural crops and palm groves over the past 24 hours up to 7 a.m. on Wednesday. The same source reported that a total of 195 fires had been recorded during this period, noting that efforts are still underway to extinguish 53 active fires across 15 provinces in different parts of the country. Civil protection personnel, units of the Algerian People's National Army, security services and Algerian citizens continue to take part in operations to bring these fires under control. Algeria's Minister of the Interior, Local Authorities and Territorial Planning, Said Sayoud, arrived in Annaba province in eastern Algeria, accompanied by a ministerial delegation and the Director General of the Algerian Civil Protection Authority, Colonel Bolem Bourlef, on the instructions of Algerian President Abdelmajid Tebboune to oversee the ongoing operations to combat the forest fires. Sayoud, accompanied by Minister of Health Mohamed Sadek Ait Messoudan, Minister of National Solidarity, Family and Women's Affairs Soraya Moulouji, and the Minister of Youth and Minister Delegate to the High Council of Youth Mustafa Hidawi, visited the Abdelrahman Khan Medical and Surgical Emergency Hospital in the municipality of El Bouni to check on the condition of patients who had been evacuated from the public hospital in the municipality of Siraidi, eastern Algeria in Annaba.
The patients were evacuated from the hospital and transferred to El Bouni Hospital in Annaba, and we visited them at the hospital. I thank God that the situation did not go any further and that we did not suffer any loss of life. This is in itself a significant achievement. I would like to express my sincere gratitude to all the local authorities, the civil protection, the People's National Army, the security services, the National Gendarmerie, the National Police, and the other security agencies. I also thank the citizens who mobilized and responded in this way, as well as the elected officials whose prompt intervention at the right time helped prevent what could have become a real human tragedy.
The Algerian minister added that President Abdelmajid Tebboune is closely and continuously monitoring the efforts of all the agencies mobilized to extinguish the fires and provide assistance to those affected.
The President of the Republic gave us a series of instructions before our arrival to Annaba province. First and foremost, he instructed us to check on the well-being of the residents. He also directed the local authorities to conduct a comprehensive assessment after putting out the fire, to document all material losses suffered by the affected families so that they can be compensated. In addition, the damaged homes will be rebuilt. According to the local authorities, around 150 houses have been identified and recorded as having been destroyed by the fires so far. The affected citizens will be compensated, their homes will be reconstructed, and normal conditions will be restored. They will also be rehoused as soon as possible.
Firefighters are battling wildfires across Algeria as rugged terrain and high temperatures hamper efforts to contain the blazes threatening forests, villages and farmland. Civil protection teams, security forces and air and ground crews are working around the clock, while satellite imagery suggests the fires are part of a broader wave of wildfires sweeping across the Mediterranean. Nabil Khazini has the report.
Across several provinces in Algeria, forests and bushes have been hit by a series of fires as a prolonged heatwave raises the risk of new outbreaks. These satellite images show the scale of the fires. In response, a large-scale operation is underway, with emergency teams deployed across several provinces. On the ground, the response is organized through a joint effort. Civil protection teams are moving through the affected areas as part of a coordinated field operation involving the People's National Army, mobile intervention units, forest services and local authorities. Working together, all are carrying out interventions to contain the spread of the flames, protect nearby communities and reduce damage to Algeria's forest areas. Behind every intervention is a vast logistical effort. Thousands of officers are taking part in the operations, alongside hundreds of firefighting vehicles. Above them, helicopters and water-bombing aircraft are being used to reach difficult areas and support teams working on the ground. The operations continue throughout the day and night. So far, a number of fires have been brought under control, while teams remain deployed to contain the remaining fires. As temperatures remain high across parts of Algeria, emergency services continue to maintain a state of alert. What Algeria is experiencing is not an isolated situation. Large-scale wildfires have also affected southern Europe, where thousands of hectares have been consumed by flames, and authorities have been forced to carry out emergency evacuations. The wildfires of this summer have therefore become a shared challenge for countries across the Mediterranean basin.
Always in the Mediterranean, firefighters in France's Var department said they had brought a forest fire that scorched nearly 1,700 hectares under control. On Wednesday, fire service spokesperson Eric Gorin said hotspots and isolated flames remain, requiring continued monitoring. The blaze, which broke out on Tuesday in Provence, forced the evacuation of around 400 people, while firefighters continue cooling operations to prevent reignition. French authorities have evacuated around 400 people after a massive wildfire broke out on Tuesday in the country's southeast, burning 1,700 hectares and spreading rapidly across a mountain in the Provence region. Officials have urged residents to remain vigilant as hot, dry winds, record temperatures and parched vegetation are expected to worsen fire conditions later this week. Authorities in the Var department have also ordered additional evacuations in 3 towns threatened by the advancing flames, while hundreds of displaced residents have been provided with temporary shelters. France recorded 5,764 excess deaths above the normal average between 17th June and 2nd July, according to data from health authorities. French television channel BFM TV reported on Wednesday. The French Public Health Agency said the figure represents a 36% increase in mortality during a period marked by several heat waves. US President Donald Trump threatened a military response to any Iranian attack on ships in the Strait of Hormuz, saying that any strike involving missiles, drones or other weapons would be met with attacks on key facilities inside Iran. In a post on Truth Social on Wednesday, Trump said the United States would strike and destroy a bridge or power station if Iran fired on any vessel in the strait, adding that potential targets could include facilities in or around Tehran.
From this point forward, every time the Islamic Republic of Iran fires on a vessel in the Strait of Hormuz, whether with a missile, rocket, drone, or any other means or weapon, the United States will bomb and destroy one bridge or power plant, including facilities located near or within the capital city of Tehran.
The U.S. military announced on Wednesday that it had completed its latest strikes on Iran, marking the 11th consecutive night of operations. In a statement, the U.S. Central Command said the strikes targeted Iranian military operations centers, naval capabilities, aircraft shelters, drone storage facilities, and military logistics infrastructure. It said the roughly 75-minute operation was aimed at reducing Iran's ability to threaten commercial shipping in the Strait of Hormuz.
U.S. Central Command assets targeted Iranian military operations center, naval capabilities, aircraft hangars, drone storage facilities, and military logistics infrastructure to further degrade Iran's ability to threaten commercial shipping in the Strait of Hormuz.
The U.S. military said that Iran had attacked more than 30 commercial vessels passing through the Strait of Hormuz over the past 3 months. It added that the strait remains open to commercial shipping despite what it described as Iranian aggression.
Over the past 3 months, Iran has attacked more than 30 commercial vessels transiting this vital international waterway for regional and global trade. These unprovoked attacks endangered the lives of hundreds of innocent seafarers and undermined freedom of navigation. Despite Iranian aggression, the Strait of Hormuz remains open to commercial shipping. Since early May, U.S. Central Command forces have helped facilitate the transit of nearly 900 commercial vessels and 450 million barrels of crude oil.
Iran's Tasnim news agency reported on Wednesday, citing a military source, that Tehran would respond by targeting infrastructure and energy facilities linked to U.S. interests in the region if Washington carried out strikes on bridges or power stations inside Iran. The source added that Iran remains committed to exercising its sovereignty over the Strait of Hormuz, saying ships would be able to pass safely through the waterway if coordinated with Tehran and in line with Iranian arrangements. Iran's state television reported that large numbers of armed citizens from across the country are arriving on Abu Musa Island to defend Iranian islands. In a statement on Wednesday, the broadcaster said the entire Gulf region is under continuous surveillance by Iranian armed forces, adding that the islands of Abu Musa, Greater Tanb and Lesser Tanb are fully prepared for comprehensive defense. Iran has threatened the United States with what it described as a crushing response to what it called aggression. In an interview with Iran's Mehr news agency on Wednesday, Ibrahim Rezai, a member of the Iranian Parliament's National Security and Foreign Policy Committee, said that Washington's failure to honor its promises had been expected. Iranian Foreign Ministry spokesperson Ismail Baghai said that repeated U.S. attacks and threats against nuclear facilities constitute a blatant violation of the fundamental principles of the United Nations Charter and international law. In a post on X on Wednesday, Baghai said that all of Iran's nuclear activities had been reported to the International Atomic Energy Agency, IAEA, in accordance with its safeguards obligations. He added that what he called the U.S. obsessive focus on the Karling area, which he said has no nuclear activity, was merely a fabricated pretext for aggression, destruction, and sabotage.
U.S. threats against our nuclear facilities are a violation of international law. The Iranian people stand firm and united, ready to confront any hostile act by the United States or any violation of their country's sovereignty and national security with all their strength.
Iran said its armed forces targeted U.S. bases and facilities in Kuwait, Bahrain and Jordan. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps IRGC said it's launched drone attacks on U.S. military logistics sites at Camp Doha in Kuwait and targeted infrastructure linked to an Amazon data center in Bahrain. Iran's military also reported strikes on U.S. facilities at Al Azraq Air Base in Jordan, describing the attacks as a response to ongoing U.S. strikes on Iran. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio said on Wednesday that the United States remains ready to negotiate to resolve the Iranian crisis, but that Tehran is not taking the talk seriously. He added that the escalating conflict has disrupted two of the world's most important energy transit routes. Rubio made the remarks during a meeting of ASEAN foreign ministers in Manila, saying Washington remains committed to diplomacy while questioning Iran's commitment to negotiations to the same extent.
Once again, the United States is always committed to diplomacy. We are open-minded and always willing to engage in negotiated settlements of differences, and that remains true in the case of Iran.
U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio stressed that Iranian control of the Strait of Hormuz would set a dangerous precedent with consequences that could extend far beyond the Middle East. Let's take a listen.
And if we create a precedent in the Middle East where a nation state can decide that they are going to control an international waterway, charge a toll, and if you don't pay them, blow up your ships, we have created a very dangerous precedent which will repeat itself in other parts of the world, including in this region.
U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth estimated the cost of the war with Iran at $37.5 billion so far from an earlier estimate of around $29 billion in mid-May. During a Senate Appropriations Committee hearing, Hegseth defended a request for about $67 billion in additional Pentagon funding, saying the current Defense Department estimate stands at $37.5 billion. Hegseth and Joint Chiefs of Staff Chairman General Dan Caney told Congress that the funding request was urgent and necessary to cover Pentagon expenses related to the conflict with Iran through the end of September.
I appreciated your perspective on the
toll, call it a fee, call it an exchange, call it control. They would do something that they would try to hold it at issue.
A Palestinian man died from injuries sustained in a previous Israel occupation strike in Gaza City as occupation forces continued violations of the ceasefire in the Gaza Strip through shelling, demolitions and military incursions. Palestinian local sources reported that the man died on Wednesday after being wounded in an occupation attack on a civilian vehicle on Al Jalala Street in central Gaza City days earlier. The development came as occupation forces advanced into the Al Sika Street in the Zaytun neighborhood and eastern Gaza City under air cover and heavy gunfire while carrying out large-scale demolitions in areas of Gaza City and Khan Yunis. Gaza's Palestinian Health Ministry said that 12 people were killed and 12 others injured in the past 24 hours due to continued Israel occupation attacks. In its daily report on Wednesday, the ministry said the death toll since the ceasefire was announced has reached 1,180, with 3,810 injured and 802 people recovered from under the rubble. It added that the overall death toll since the start of the war in Gaza has risen to 73,305, with the total number of injured reaching 173,918. Gaza's government media office condemned what it described as the occupation efforts to expand and extend the so-called Yellow Line, calling on the United Nations and mediators to intervene urgently to stop what it called a silent crime. In a statement on Wednesday, the office said the Israel occupation was using the line as a cover for a gradual policy aimed at isolating and destroying large areas of the Gaza Strip. It said restricted areas now account for around 65% of Gaza's total area, accusing the Zionist entity of seeking to impose new geographic and demographic realities through force and to entrench a policy of forced displacement. The Hamas movement called on countries sponsoring the negotiations to apply real pressure on the Israeli occupation authorities to implement the agreed terms and achieve a full withdrawal from the Gaza Strip. In a recorded speech shared on Telegram on Wednesday, Hamas political bureau chief Khalil al-Hayya said the top priority is a complete halt to what he called the occupation's aggression, killings and terrorism, urging progress toward the next phase of the agreement without further obstacles.
أولويتنا الأولى والواضحة.
Our first and clear priority is to achieve a comprehensive ceasefire, end the occupation, and secure the complete withdrawal from the Gaza Strip. From here, I call on the countries sponsoring the negotiation process to exert genuine pressure on the far-right Israeli occupation government to implement what has already been agreed upon and move forward with completing the transition to the next phase. We also reaffirm our categorical rejection of anything that undermines the legitimate rights of our people under international law, particularly our right to liberation, statehood, and self-determination.
The Polisario Front called on the UN Security Council to take immediate action to protect the life of Sahrawi human rights activist and political prisoner Naama Asfari, who has been on an open-ended hunger strike since June 8th and in prison in Kenitra, Morocco. In a letter to the Security Council, President Polisario's UN representative Sidi Mohamed Ammar said Asfari's health is deteriorating and held Moroccan authorities responsible for his safety.
During his detention, Mr. Asfari was subjected to torture, ill treatment, inadequate food and medical care, solitary confinement, punitive detention, and severe restrictions on contact with his family. His wife, Mrs. Claude Manja Asfari, has been barred from visiting him since January 2019. The Polisario Front urged the UN Security Council to take immediate action to protect Mr. Asfari's life and physical safety, holding the Moroccan occupation authorities fully responsible for his fate and that of other Sahrawi political prisoners. It also calls for him to be granted immediate access to independent medical care and private communication with his family and legal representatives.
The Polisario Front called on the United Nations to strengthen human rights protection mechanisms in the occupied Sahrawi territories, urging the creation of an independent UN mechanism to monitor violations and the expansion of the Universal Mission's mandate to include this role.
The escalation by the Moroccan occupation authorities of their repressive measures against Sahrawi activists and human rights defenders in occupied Western Sahara comes at a time when the United Nations is seeking to revive the peace process. These practices constitute an indication of bad faith, as they severely undermine trust and make negotiations almost impossible. They also run counter to the Security Council's call to avoid any action that could jeopardize the political process. Therefore, the Polisario Front renews its call on the relevant United Nations bodies to ensure the immediate and conditional release of all Sahrawi political prisoners, including the Gdaim Zik group. It also calls on the United Nations to hold the Moroccan occupation authorities accountable for their serious and ongoing violations against Sahrawi civilians, human rights defenders, and activists.
The executive director of the Western Sahara International Film Festival, Maria Carrion, called for a boycott of British director Christopher Nolan's film The Odyssey over the filming of scenes in the occupied city of Dakhla. In a statement to All24 News, Carrion said the footage filmed in Dakhla and used in the movie was illegal and represented normalization with the Moroccan occupation. Algerian President Abdelmadjid Tebboune presided on Wednesday over a ceremony at the People's Palace in Algiers honoring the top-performing students in the baccalaureate and middle school certificate exams. The ceremony was attended by senior state officials, government members, and the families of the honored students. Algerian President Abdelmadjid Tebboune congratulated students from the National Polytechnic School of Algiers on Wednesday after they won the Alan Staniforth Award for Best Newcomer Team at the International Engineering Competition Formula Student UK 2026 in the United Kingdom. In a post on social media, Tebboune praised the students' achievement at the competition held at the historic Silverstone circuit, saying it reflects the promising future of Algeria's youth and encouraging them to continue their efforts. Algerian President Abdelmadjid Tebboune signed a presidential decree on Wednesday granting pardons to imprisoned individuals who successfully passed the middle school certificate and baccalaureate exams, as well as those who obtained certificates in various vocational training programs during the 2025-2026 academic year. According to the Algerian presidency, the decree benefits nearly 5,000 prisoners from the categories covered by the pardon. Those are the latest updates from our newsroom. Thank you for joining us. Stay informed with All 24 News.